So before we move into the Italian Renaissance, I want to touch on a couple of things from the medieval. More specifically, I want to deal with music and theater. And by the way, if you're wondering about this illustration, it's an actual illustration. The medieval monks that were copying Bibles and other books get bored and have this thing with fighting snails. I don't ask, I simply report. So, medieval music. By around 500, we see a new form of music has developed, and this is called chant, and is simple, single melody in plain song. In other words, nearly spoken language. And it points to possible Middle Eastern origins, but there's another slightly more obvious possibility, which is that the melody followed natural rhythm of Latin speech. This form of music, chant, starts with monks who are 8 times a day, or numerous times a day, saying prayers communally, and they're doing so in Latin. Now, first of all, to remember the prayers, putting a little bit of a melody to it can make it easier, but secondly, if you listen to Latin, it is a very musical, very melodic language. So what's probably happening is over generations, these prayers go from just plain spoken word and slowly evolve into what we know today as Gregorian chant. Now, it's called Gregorian chant because Pope Gregory is credited with first selecting the accepted chants, and this is a form of music that is developing over the span of about 500 years, so it's taking a great deal of time to develop. Eventually, they'll start to add a parallel line of harmony when they see it as music rather than as prayer. This new melody becomes more and more independent through time up to the 10th century. By the time we get to the 11th century, we're going to see something else developing. We're going to see poetic music developing, sort of the same idea, but a secular version. And that music is often written to increase the esteem of royalty or for love. Now, the chants that we were talking about, these tend to be fairly clear pieces. Again, it's a prayer that has slowly evolved into song, just like if you say the Pledge of Allegiance with a classroom for an entire year, it starts to pick up a certain rhythm. And that's the rhythm of the people in that classroom. Now imagine that evolves over a couple of hundred years and you can see where we get to song. What I want you to do now is go back to D2L, which is probably open in another tab for you. And under this week's D2L link for the lectures, you will find an example of chant. Go ahead and listen to that. And by the way, the reason I'm doing it this way, I know it's clumsy, but I don't want copyright issues, so there you go. Go ahead and pause this and come back. Okay, moving on. Then we have medieval theater. Now, we're going to see a return of drama focusing on only 2 kinds of plays, passion plays and morality plays. A passion play is the story of Jesus, sort of the Stations of the Cross, or the last days of Jesus' life. A morality play is supposed to teach one about sin and appropriate morals and ethics. Now, morality plays will use characters, and those characters will frequently actually be in a stage setting like this. So this is usually done by Franciscan monks, and these stage settings are brought in on wagons. Imagine a wagon train pulling into town, and they're going to set up a stage, something like this. And you're going to set up in each of these a different sin. So maybe sloth, although I don't know what sloths did. I mean, they're perfectly peaceful animals living in trees. But anyway, so sloth, gluttony, lust, etc. These 7 deadly sins will be represented. And then we will pick someone, either someone from the audience or one of the friars, depending on which group is doing it. And they will walk around, they will talk to the sinners, they will figure out what the sinners have done wrong. And hopefully they will be corrected in their life. The sinners, on the other hand, will be grabbed by demons who will come out of a hell jaw, which is usually on one side of the stage. And this is actually very common in art later on. These demons, who won't look like demons that you would recognize today, that sort of demon and devil imagery hasn't been set in stone at this point yet. But they will come out, they will grab these sinners, they will drag them across stage into the hell jaw, or in some cases they will pop out from a trapdoor under them, grab them from behind, and physically pull them down into what appears to the audience to be the gates of hell. So it's supposed to be sort of a scared straight idea. Now, these plays were supposed to teach people. They were supposed to travel. You were supposed to be reminded of what sin is. And the reason these are important, especially in Northern Europe, although they're most common in Italy, but they're going to be important in Northern Italy and into Northern Europe and the continent as a whole, is because we don't have a lot of local priests who are really aware of church dogma. The role of a priest is different than it is now, and usually the priest has purchased their office throughout much of Europe through the medieval period. So they may not even be a very religious person. So the church is trying to spread these ideas. The Franciscans will do it primarily through theater. And by the way, the same stage settings that we saw here for medieval theater will also lead to early Renaissance artists starting to use a foreground, middle ground, and background just like they do on stage. The artists are getting it from the Franciscans, from theater. So it's kind of an interesting interplay between the forms of art.